that Tua comes back, week 10 or so, this offense starts to hum then. Like, I'm definitely trying to do that if I can.
For the Raiders, Brock Bowers right now is the tight end 3. If Devontae Adams gets traded, I mean, the pants are all the way off. Wheels are all the way up. Like, we are sky high. Literally, Theo Greminger is going to get like his in the future meme gif, whatever he does, because he does it periodically. It's one of my
He does.
favorites.
That's good.
It's phenomenal. It's signature Theo Greminger. Like, that is the reality if Brock Bowers is in Vegas and Devontae Adams is traded. So how are you handling Brock Bowers? Is he like a buy high target?
Good question. It actually stumped me a little bit. I'm not sure I'd call him that, and here's the reason why. They, Again, I haven't looked at the data for this week, but like they had him in pass protection more than I would have liked this week, so that concerns me. But as a player, I think teams are going to then be able to game plan for him if Adams is gone, so that's a little concerning giving the quarterback. But as a player, like he's already maybe the most talented tight end in the league, so I'm not going to buy high on him, but I have him on a few teams, and I'm not moving him. I'm not trying to get rid of him now. That's for sure.
No, no, you're we're keeping the pride. Yes, Theo will open his show with it. Absolutely, the world will be in perfection. We know it's the end of the world if Brock Bowers becomes tight end 1 overall this season. I mean, we saw a rookie do it last year with Sam Laporta.
Yeah.
Here's a trickier one: Nick Chubb. He's starting to practice this week. I don't know if he'll be activated soon, but how are you approaching who Nick Chubb had been just the workhorse for Cleveland? Is he in a void? You're shaking your
How
head.
how is this man practicing? Is my question. So, and but the thing with the Browns too is
He's
like
built different, Ryan. He's a
it's
different animal.
it's
He's like
very
Derrick Henry
clear.
2.0. Like, this guy
It's
is built different.
it's funny you said that's literally what I was thinking. It's like this is a guy I'll bury him when he's dead. So if the Browns are 1-7, it's like why are we rushing Nick Chubb in? But if they can stay alive over the next few weeks, I mean, he's not a guy I'm interested in betting against. Let's put it that way.
Ooh, so buy low on Nick Chubb's that we're
Yeah.
trying to get him. There we go. So, sweet. Jaden Daniels, quarterback 1. Quarterback 1. We're looking at the rest of his schedule or the next few games. It gets a little more difficult. Like we talked about, Washington having a nice schedule to start the season, but Jaden Daniels taking advantage of it. I mean, he's doing what he's supposed to do. Let's not penalize him for it.
Oh no, he's been great. He's the real deal. I mean, it's I do think darker days are ahead though. Cleveland, Baltimore, then Chicago in week 8. Like that's pretty brutal. The Steelers are very good against Lamar Jackson, so that's a tough matchup too. So I do think that he's the real deal. I think Washington, as long as he doesn't get hurt, as long as he stays healthy, like he's the best quarterback the Commanders have ever had already. That's I'm not really an overreactor, and that's where I'm at. So, but quarterback 1 overall in fantasy, no, I think it's possible for this season that the last 2 weeks have been the peak, and that's not even a knock because the last 2 weeks have been freaking ridiculous. So that's my stance on him. Definitely not again. If someone's willing to overpay for him, if someone's like, hey, I'll give you Josh Allen for Jaden Daniels, like, okay, that's fine. No, in redraft, that's fine. I'll take that, no problem. But not panicking. I think he's going to finish as a quarterback 1, and again, absolutely ridiculous the last 2 weeks.
On my Scott Fishbowl teams, I have both Josh Allen and Jaden Daniels. It feels so good.
Baby, yeah.
Delicious.
Well,
We're gonna finish up this section with a rookie. We'll examine wide receiver Brian Thomas. He's been coming along. He's earned 20% target shares. He's been getting red zone targets. I mean, Christian Kirk has not been playing very well. Evan Ingram has been out. The Jags offense has been struggling. And there's also been some chatter from Jeremy Fowler that Christian Kirk is on the trade block. So I think the better days are ahead for Brian Thomas, even though we've already seen him spike a few times. Like, he is a buy candidate, I think, in terms of he could end up being a round 4 or 5 player for next year. And I think that's a pretty nice spot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, every Tuesday, I might do it on Monday. Some weeks, I watch every game, so I write down notes. And in week one, I said I think Brian Thomas is already the best receiver on the Jaguars, and he's already producing like the best receiver on the Jaguars. Not only is he the best, he's producing that way. I love that 4-5 turned type player. That makes a ton of sense. Love him going forward too. I think he's the guy there. And while the Jaguars could be a team that fires their coach in season, which is usually a bad sign for the offense. Like there's usually repercussions for that kind of move. But Trevor Lawrence is still a good player. So it's not like it's not like Malik Neighbors with Daniel Jones, where you're hoping and praying that the consistency. If Trevor Lawrence started tearing it up in the second half, it wouldn't be completely shocking. So I like Brian Thomas for sure.
Yeah, he's one that I want to, you know, put uh, jump on the bandwagon. This is the time before we see the full breakout, before he becomes
Yeah.
the most popular or one of the most popular players. All right, it's question answer time. We've got about 5 minutes left in the segment. I promise, I am a man who keeps my word, Ryan. You know that. The people know that. You stick around. We get your questions answered rapid fire. But do we want rest of season likely, Kraft, or Fryermuth? Who do you think, Ryan?
I'm actually gonna go Fryermuth since he's the second piece in that offense, but it would be between Fryermuth or Kraft.
Yeah, I go Fryermuth as well. He's been the most consistent, and I think this has just been low for Musgrave. Like, just
Yeah.
go. It'll go through ebbs and flows, and
Yeah.
same thing for Mark Andrews. Like, I think better days are ahead for both of those players.
Agreed.
Would we trade Garrett Wilson for Higgins, Brian Thomas, and Kelsey? I mean, yes.
All three of them, yes,
I
definitely.
mean, yes. So, 1 for 3. Give
Yeah.
me the Higgins, Thomas, Kelsey side. Cool. Jelly asks, do I hold onto Mostert, who is hurt, and the bye next week?
No.
No. We're letting Mostert go. I'm trying to read some of these, and some of them are not making sense. I just dropped Calvin Ridley for TJ Hawkinson. Is this a good move?
Let me make the comment since you're a biased Calvin Ridley guy. So let me make the comment here. Didn't you have someone else better like that you should have dropped before Calvin Ridley? Because taking Hawkinson, pat on the back, that's a very long-term move. I love it. I'm not sure I would have dropped Calvin Ridley in the overwhelming majority of situations, though. That seems a little aggressive to me.
I want to aggressively target TJ Hawkinson, though. And
Yeah,
if you
right.
are all set at wide receiver and you've got wide receivers on wide receivers, I don't mind it. The pathway for TJ Hawkinson to be tight end 1 from weeks 10 onward, 11 onward, to be tight end 1 during the fantasy playoffs, like, that is very much within the range of outcomes, especially how bad the tight end position has been and how good the Vikings have been. Like, give Hawkinson some time to get acclimated. Don't expect that he's going to be doing things right away. But this is kind of fitting with the timeline that I thought we get a week 6 bye, go through week 7, be activated for week 8, around that time. And so,
add some.
Go for it, Ryan.
I was going to say, to add some context for Hawkinson, I literally looked at every one of my teams this week to see if he was available in any of my leagues.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Let's see. Lots of comments. Should I trade Pittman, Mostert, and a 6th for Josh Jacobs? Like a 6th in redraft for next year?
Yeah. I mean, it depends. If you're in win now mode, I think I do it, and you need Josh Jacobs, and you don't have anyone at running back 2, maybe. But
and you don't need the wide receiver, Pittman.
Yeah, that's the thing there. Because like Mostert long term, I don't care. 6th round pick, like I don't care about that either. Again, it depends on format though with that. So I would lean that if you think you're a contender.
Agreed. Should I accept a trade where I'm getting Garrett Wilson and giving up Ayuk and Zay Flowers? No, like Flowers has had some down games, but he's still a flex guy, and Ayuk, I think better days are ahead.
Yeah, I could see Ayuk and Garrett Wilson finishing up pretty similarly at this point. I think I would trade either of them straight up for Garrett Wilson without much, trepidation, but I wouldn't do the 1 for 2 or 2 for 1 rather.
Yes. All right, let's see if there are any other questions. Blah blah blah. Yes. It looks like we answered all of the questions, Ryan. This is great. Make sure if you like the content, found this helpful, smash the subscribe button, hit the like, subscribe to Player Profiler, follow Ryan Reynolds on the Twitter machine at Ryan Reynolds NFL, not Van City Reynolds. Ryan is much better looking than that other guy. Don't get confused. You can follow me on the X Machine, Bradley Stalder at FF Stalder. Man versus Machine normally goes live at 9 p.m. Eastern, but life happens, and I appreciate Ryan's flexibility to bump it to 8 today. And also shout out to Memphis and Dynasty Warzone. They're going live at 9, so tune in to Player Profiler right after this. Dynasty Warzone goes live on Player Profiler. Any last words for the people, Ryan, before we sign off?
Still, it's still 4 weeks. Don't overreact, but if you're in a 1-3 hole, maybe it's time to start making some changes.
Make some changes, baby. I started my home league. I think this was like 5 years ago, 6, whatever it was, when the Rams were the number one offense with Todd Gurley and Robert Woods and that Jared Goff. I didn't have all those players on my team, but I started 0-7 in my home league. It was disaster zone, like just getting nipped left and right. So I scrambled and just traded everybody for the Rams offense, and I stacked and stacked, and I won the rest of the games, won the league, ran it straight through, and it's possible. Don't give up. Like, make the moves, put your chips in. What does it hurt? If you're losing, might as well give some shots and take some bets. Make it happen. Until next time, everyone, good luck in the fantasy football streets.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.
to suggest that it's just a good matchup. It's like, all right, I'm not chasing the points, I'm chasing the matchup. Carolina's a good matchup, so, and the Bears are at home. So, like, they're just coming off a really good home game. So, maybe there's something to it. Maybe Caleb feels a little bit better at home. I honestly, like, if you can't start DeAndre Swift with confidence after the performance he just had against the Carolina Panthers, then you should just trade him right now. Go try to trade him. Maybe that's not a terrible idea. And sell the guy on the Carolina matchup this week. All right, let's jump down to the third one here. It's the same exact game because, that's what we do around here. Keep it synergized. We have the Chicago Bears, who have struggled against running backs. Now, they only given up the 10th most fantasy points to running backs, but you have to remember, one of those weeks was Joe Mixon, who got hurt mid-game. If you look at the other games, they've allowed a top 12 running back in all 3 games. Tony Pollard, RB12, Jonathan Taylor, RB5, Kyron Williams, RB10. This week, they get a red-hot, and honestly, the fact that it's week 5, and I'm saying this, a red-hot Chuba Hubbard. Is Chuba a guy that you want in your lineups this week, Derek?
Yeah, it definitely is going to be, like you said, the Bears are about the bottom third in the league in running backs, about 100 yards per game, and also some receptions as well. Chuba Hubbard's had 2 opponents for the last 2 weeks. Roughly the same level of defense versus running backs. So this is a very, I think you can bring forward, the last 2 weeks, especially of his production, and estimate something in the neighborhood. Again, I'll go back to our home versus road tool, and he's actually shown to be better on the road, which, like you said, they're in Chicago, so he scores about 6% better on the road than he does at home. And when you go to the timeshare and the target share with Miles Sanders, it's still 2 to 1. So he's getting 2/3 of the carries still, half and half. The targets are about 50-50, but what really I focus on is the running back rushes for the last 2 games that we were talking about, and it's been 9-2 Chuba over Miles Sanders. So I don't think there's a workload question here. The matchup's pretty good. He is on the road where he tends to do a little bit better. So, yeah, definitely I'm starting Chuba Hubbard again this week.
And I want to apologize. I misspoke. Derrick Henry is not on a bye week, but ironically, the Tennessee Titans are. So Tony Pollard, Saquon Barkley, J.K. Dobbins, and the Lions RBs are out bye this week. So Derrick Henry owners, do not panic. I just lost my mind for a minute. All right. I actually do have some shares of Chuba, and I'm getting him in my lineups. I mean, since the Andy Dalton switch, I think there's the offense just looks a lot better. And honestly, at this point, too, like Chuba, until Jonathan Brooks comes back and muddies up the waters, he's operating as a clear RB1 in an offense that has turned a corner. So I'm going to get him in my lineups and plus matchups when I can. Let's jump into some comments here. Jamie's joining the show. Jamie, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you for jumping on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. If you're watching currently anywhere else, X, Instagram, wherever you're watching the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you jump over to YouTube and give us a subscribe. We do our NFL Sunday Live Start Sit Show for 2 hours before kickoff, where we answer every single one of your start sit questions 2 hours before kickoff. We also break down key injuries, weather updates, everything you need to know up until kickoff. So join us every Sunday live, 2 hours on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. We also have Do Your Part, which I love the name, by the way. We're going to try to do our part here, but the problem is you didn't give us the trade. Do your part, and give us the trade, my man, or lady. We don't know, but let us know what the actual trade is. We'll answer that for you. Jamie, Roschon Johnson's a running back for the Bears. So if you don't remember, there was a guy that was on our show a bunch last year who really pumped up Roschon. I don't remember his name, but he loved Roschon. If you want to go reach out to him, he could tell you more about him. Jamie also chimes in here. Swift won't see a 41% target share. Yeah, I don't think so either. Derek, if you have a second, do me a favor. Check out the Rams' defensive targets allowed by position. Let me know if the Rams are a really good matchup for running backs in the passing game. Let me know, because I'm curious if that's something that's a trend we should be looking out for. Epic Fail, always a pleasure having you on. Don't tempt me to keep Roschon. I don't think anybody's tempted. After the DeAndre Swift solidified his role. And honestly, I thought, even when preseason-wise, I kind of thought Roschon made sense as the Zach Charbonnet Charbonnet, still never say it right, in the Shane Waldron offense while Swift kind of operated as the Kenneth Walker role. I thought that made a ton of sense, but then Roshan was a healthy scratch for a couple weeks. I don't know what that deal was, but I think that's the two roles that make sense moving forward. So, honestly, I don't see much upside for fantasy football for Roshan other than a handcuff to Swift. George, we will get to your George Play 01. We will get to some of your start sick questions at the end of the podcast. We do appreciate you jumping in. All right, let's get to the next one, folks. And we're bringing this up today because one of the top waiver ads heading into week 5 is Zach Ertz. And one of the key trends that we've noticed over the last year or so is that the Cleveland Browns have been elite at shutting down tight ends. And so if you look at their 20th in fantasy points allowed, which doesn't sound too bad, but when you look at the guys who actually face them, Jake Ferguson, tight end 25, Brock Bowers, tight end 23. Honestly, I know the Commanders are white hot right now, but I think Zach Ertz is someone where, yeah, if you want your 4 for 25, 4 for 30, sure, you can play him, but there's probably better options. Derek, what did you find in the tools? Does Zach Ertz make sense as a start this week?
Yeah, so if you go to our defensive target tool, the Browns are allowing almost 6 targets per game to tight ends, almost about 20%. But then you also go to our slot versus wide tool, and although it is geared to wide receivers, but you can kind of equate the slot to tight end play, and they're actually one of the better ones. They're top 10 in points allowed, so get only 9.2 fantasy points to the slot. So they really have been stifling the middle of the field. As indicated, you mentioned the matchups for the tight ends in the first few weeks. Jake Ferguson 3 for 15, Brenton Strange 3 for 65, Daniel Bellinger 1 for 17, and Brock Bowers 2 for 19. So 3 of the 4 didn't even break the 20-yard mark in receptions. So for Ertz, he's averaging 4 targets per game. The one thing I give him though, he's got a 94% catch rate. So if he's throwing the ball, he's making the catch. That's about the only positive that I'm really finding for him. He's averaging about 38 yards per game. Hasn't scored a touchdown yet. Hasn't even had a red zone target yet. So no, for me, Zach Ertz is going to be a pass. If you get 4, maybe 5 fantasy points in a PPR from him, you probably feel lucky. So yeah, I'm definitely the tools indicate that you definitely want to sit tight ends versus Browns.
There's some really good streamer matchups this week. Juwan Johnson has the Kansas City Chiefs. You have, I don't know what to think of the tight end situation for the Bengals because Eric All is, he got 4 catches last week, and Mike Gesicki didn't really get much, but he ran more routes. But Gesicki and him have Baltimore, who's really good matchup. Then you have the Jacksonville Jaguars situation with Bretton Strange if Evan Ingram's no-go again. And then you also have Tyler Conklin, who actually is facing the Minnesota Vikings, a revenge game, by the way. So Aaron Rodgers is going to know that. So, but all 4 of those guys, I think I'd rather start this week again than Zach Ertz. But Zach Ertz has kind of earned some, he is a streaming tight end any single time he has a good matchup. I think that offense is rolling. He's a very prominent pass catcher in that offense, so I do like Ertz season long. All right, jumping out at number 5, it's start QBs against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And, one of the things that we want to focus on is understanding, basically fantasy points matter, but how fantasy points are being delivered. And we talk about this in the slot versus wide tool, and what I mean by that is, just because a fantasy team gives up the most fantasy points to a position like quarterback, you also have to dive into where the fantasy points are coming from. A nugget like that was with the Falcons. Remember, I talked about Jalen Hurts was the QB2, but he had 14.5 fantasy points on the ground. So if you're not a scrambling quarterback, you're not going to get that advantage against the Falcons, who have been very good at shutting down passing games. Well, that's not the case here. If you look at the Jaguars, they are one of the biggest pass funnel defenses in football. They are actually they're okay against the run. They are horrific against the pass. And by the way, this stems from last year in 23 as well. So looking at the guys, Tua Tagovailoa, statue quarterback, QB 8, Deshaun Watson, whatever you want to call him, QB 17, Josh Allen, just awesome QB2. CJ Stroud last week, QB7, well over 300 yards passing. So I guess my question for you, though, Derek, there could be two options. It could be Anthony Richardson or our sweet baby Jesus, Joe Flacco. My question for you is if Anthony Richardson's active, is he a must start? And if Joe Flacco gets the nod, are you streaming him this week?
Yeah, so if I'm a Colts fan or if I have one or both of these guys on my team, I want Joe Flacco to start this game. It's because of volume. You know, you said friendly to quarterbacks, and the Jags defense definitely is giving up the most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. Over 1,100 yards already and 7 passing touchdowns already. So going to our defensive targets allowed tool, forced most targets and most of them to wide receivers. So it's all about volume, frankly. If you look at Joe Flacco, even last week, he didn't play the full game of 3/4 of the game or so. 26 attempts in 51 snaps. So he's throwing the ball. I mean, that's what he did last year, and that's why we love him. He's throwing the ball. Anthony Richardson on the other side, he hasn't thrown the ball. 30 attempts, only twice in the 8 games of his career. I mean, granted, those weren't full games in some cases because of injury, but he's not a volume passer, whereas Joe Flacco is. And you've got the defense that gives up the most points to quarterbacks. You need a volume quarterback this week, and let Richardson get healthy. Let him sit one more week. Play Joe Flacco this week and stream him if you can. You're gonna love the outcome.
I don't understand, after watching what Joe Flacco did last year with the Browns, why 32 NFL teams are like, nah, I don't want him. I don't want him to start for us. Like, Joe Flacco's a starting quarterback. Like, just watch every single time this guy steps on a football field. Even with the Jets a few years back, the dude was throwing for 400 yards while Zach Wilson, the Jets were like, well, we got to see what we got in Zach Wilson. They could have easily, by the way, sat Zach Wilson for a season, let him develop behind the scenes, and let Joe Flacco develop the rest of your roster because the dude's throwing for 400 yards in games.
Can you imagine,
I don't understand.
The difference in the narrative if he was in Miami as a backup quarterback rather than up there with the Colts?
Wild. But, I mean, just look at what he did last week. Look at Downs and Michael Pittman. If you're a Michael Pittman owner or a Josh Downs owner, you're praying that Joe Flacco gets the start here. Anthony Richardson, I don't want to just poo-poo. As of today, he is not a good passer. Like, it's just awful to watch. He can't make the easy throw. He makes the big throws. Alex Pierce deep passes are nice, but he's not making this simple, 5-yard out pass. And Joe Flacco, I don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't understand how franchises think, it's like winning football games is a bad thing. The Browns went to the freaking playoffs last year because Joe Flacco was he won comeback player of the year after only playing half the games because he was that dominant. Sorry, I'm getting excited. That gets me going like Joe Flacco talk.
Yeah, exactly.
But if he starts to get this is by the way, DFS article from Derek guaranteed Joe Flacco is going to be in that one, folks, because he's going to be a fantastic play this week if he gets the start.
And so will Alex Pierce. You mentioned Alex Pierce. Yeah, that's another name that really popped up on my radar besides Michael Pittman. But Alex Pierce is with Joe Flacco at quarterback. I really like that matchup this week for him.
I think either way you're going with the Colt. Last year in Jacksonville, Anthony Richardson played well. He had 2 touchdowns, 233 passing yards, 40 yards rushing. That's a solid day. And then Gardner Minshew in the other game had over 300 yards passing. And listen, I like Gardner. He's not a terrible quarterback. I think he'd be a great backup. I don't think he's a starter. He should be with the with the Raiders right now. I mean, they should be flipped. He should have stayed in Indianapolis, and Flacco should be the starter for the Raiders. Devontae Adams right now would be going to the Hall of Fame early. He wouldn't be trying to leave Las Vegas. He'd be doing what do they call that? A residency in Las Vegas if he was with Joe Flacco. I'm there. I got it. I got it.
You got it.
But either way, I'm starting one of these guys. I think both of them are slam dunks. I hope Joe Flacco starts just so I can talk about him on Sunday. All right, on the same game, let's flip it over to the other side here and talk about the Indianapolis Colts. And you should start your QBs against the Colts. Now the Colts one is a little different. They have allowed 117 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns on the ground. But if you're just looking at how the games played out last year, Trevor Lawrence played pretty well in both the games that he faced the Colts last year. But if you look at the guys who played well against the Colts, you got C.J. Stroud, QB 11. Malik Willis played okay. I mean, granted, Malik Willis is Malik Willis, QB 25, but it was Kayla Williams, QB 9. Justin Fields, QB 1. My sweet baby Justin Fields. Oh, QB 1 last week. Is Trevor Lawrence startable? Is he a top 12 option this week, Derek?
Yeah, so the key thing I pulled out of this actually is looking at his season so far, and his best game was at home. He's had one home game this year. This will be his second home game in week 5. And the best home game for him, yardage-wise, was week 2 versus the Browns, who ironically have the 4th best defense versus quarterback. So they have a really stout defense, and at home, Lawrence had his best game of the year throwing the rock. So obviously you want to look at our home versus road tool, and he's about 5% better at home, so that tracks. But the other thing I noticed as well when our win-loss tool, and by the way, the Jags are favored by 3 at home. Lawrence's win-loss index is 143, which means he's almost 50% better as a quarterback in wins, and he's better at home. So he's playing a Colts defense, like you said, bottom 2-3 versus the quarterback. A lot better, or a lot more favorable matchup than the last time he was at home versus Cleveland. His home road splits, win-loss splits, both show that he's better at home. So to me, he is maybe at the end of the top 12, but yeah, he's probably a top 12, top 13 quarterback this week. Maybe he would peak at about 9 or 10, but yeah, 12 or 13 seems about right.
Baker Mayfield or Trevor Lawrence?
I'm probably going to go Baker because I think his floor is stronger. And there's upside to both of them, but I think it's just a matter of the floor between the two. And Baker's floor is higher than Lawrence's, but I don't hate either one of them. Yeah, I would go Baker.
You know what the problem for me is? Like, I almost rather Joe Flacco play, because like if Flacco's in, I just feel like the flow of by the way, JT is banged up as well. And so they could lean a little more. If Flacco's in, they could throw a little more. That's better game flow for passing, for time management. Like when you play the Colts, sometimes you have mobile quarterbacks. The game goes quick because the clock's running, because they're running with the quarterback. They're running the football a lot. So I actually am going to lean slightly Trevor Lawrence in this one over Baker, but I'll probably eat my crow on that one. All right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, before we get off this, you mentioned Joe Flacco again. So looking at his, I'll go back to last year, 5 of his 6 games last year, he had over 40 attempts, over 40 passing attempts. 5 of the 6 games last year, and again last week in a partial game he had 26. So yeah, and I mentioned volume. That volume passing, it really, frankly, for either one of these guys. Lawrence or Flacco, assuming it's Flacco. I like the volume passing game. The over-under on this one is currently 46. I'd probably bet the over, to be honest with you.
I like it. All right, let's get to our last takeaway heading into week 5. It's start your running backs against the Raiders and